Most people think the way to reach an avoidant is through persistence, more reassurance, more closeness, more proving that you care. But that's the very thing that drives them away. For someone with an avoidant attachment style, love feels like danger. The moment intimacy deepens, their instincts shout run. Not because they don't care, but because their nervous system confuses connection with loss of freedom. Avoidants grew up learning that closeness costs something: autonomy, peace, sometimes even self-worth. So when they meet someone who moves too fast emotionally, their body registers it as pressure. Their heart may want to stay, but their defenses demand escape. That's why love with an avoidant can feel like being punished for caring. You open your heart, and they close theirs. But here's the secret. Avoidants don't need convincing, they need calm. Safety for them doesn't come from promises. It comes from consistency without intrusion. From knowing that you'll be there, but not on them. They begin to open when they realize your presence doesn't threaten their space. When they see you can handle their silence without turning it into rejection. When you respond to distance not with panic, but with patience. The irony is that emotional distance isn't their way of rejecting you. It's their way of managing fear. So the real key isn't to bridge the gap instantly, but to make the space between you feel safe. Love for an avoidant grows slowly, almost secretly, in the quiet moments when they realize they don't have to defend themselves from you. It's not about changing who they are. It's about becoming the one person who doesn't activate their fear. The one who gives them something rarer than affection, emotional safety. If you want to better understand how to deal with avoidance, then subscribe to the channel to know everything. For an avoidant, safety is not built through words. It's built through energy. You can say, "I love you," 100 times. But if your tone carries tension, urgency, or expectation, they'll hear something entirely different: pressure. To them, emotional demand feels like emotional danger. That's why the avoidant often withdraws just when things begin to feel intimate. It's not indifference. It's self-protection. The language that makes an avoidant feel safe is quiet, steady, and predictable. It's in your pacing. In the way you can sit beside them without needing constant affirmation. In the way you don't try to fix their silences or chase their retreats. They notice that. And though they may never say it out loud, it disarms them. It tells them, you're safe to be exactly as you are right now. Most people underestimate how powerful non-reactivity is. When an avoidant pulls away and you don't spiral, you become different from everyone who ever made them feel cornered. Your stillness becomes proof of safety. It shows them that love doesn't have to mean losing control. And for someone whose entire emotional world revolves around maintaining control, that realization changes everything. The secret isn't to make them dependent. It's to make them comfortable with dependence existing as an option. When they see that your care doesn't come with strings, when they realize you respect their rhythm, something subtle shifts. The walls they built to protect themselves start to loosen, not because you broke them down, but because you made them unnecessary. In the end, the avoidant's greatest test of love isn't how much you can give them, but how much peace you can hold. It's not about proving your devotion. It's about showing them that love can exist without the threat of being consumed. Because only then will they dare to step closer, not out of obligation, but out of genuine trust. It never happens dramatically. There's no big confession, no cinematic turning point. It happens quietly, so quietly you might miss it. The first real sign that an avoidant is beginning to trust you is not that they suddenly open up. It's that they stop running. Avoidants measure safety not by what you say, but by how you react to their absence. When they pull back and you don't chase, they feel a strange sense of calm. It confuses them at first, because in their experience, distance has always created drama. People usually protest, demand, cry, or guilt them into closeness. But when you do none of that, when you simply allow space without resentment, you teach them something radical. Closeness can coexist with freedom. That moment changes everything. The avoidant, for perhaps the first time, feels they can breathe in love instead of suffocating in it. And with that breath comes curiosity. They start to wonder what it would be like to stay. They begin noticing how your energy doesn't try to possess them, how your affection doesn't punish their hesitation, how you make room for their solitude instead of taking it personally. This is when trust starts forming, slowly, subtly, invisibly. They might text more. They might share a story from childhood. They might sit next to you a little longer without fidgeting. These small things are monumental in their world, because trust, for them, is not about grand gestures. It's about safety in micro moments. The challenge is patience. When you rush this stage, you break the spell. When you interpret their slower pace as rejection, you reinforce their fear that closeness equals chaos. But when you honor their rhythm, when you let love unfold without demanding definition, you become something rare, a partner who doesn't just love them, but understands how to love them. For the avoidant, trust is the bridge between fear and love. Cross it gently, and they'll meet you there, not because you pulled them, but because you waited long enough for them to walk on their own. When an avoidant asks for space, most people panic. They assume it's rejection, a silent goodbye, or proof that the relationship never mattered. But for the avoidant, space isn't an ending, it's maintenance. It's how they regulate the intensity of emotions that, to them, feel overwhelming. This is one of the hardest truths to grasp if you love an avoidant. Their withdrawal is often not about you. It's about their nervous system. When closeness becomes too much, they don't think, I need to get away from this person. They think, I need to get back to myself. The difference is subtle but profound. If you can honor that difference, you become safe. You stop being part of the chaos they fear. You become the calm that lets them return. That's why pressuring them during moments of withdrawal backfires. It confirms their worst belief, that love demands their surrender. But when you respect the distance without resentment, you give them something extraordinary, emotional breathing room. In that space, they don't stop thinking about you. Quite the opposite. They reflect. They test the emotional memory of the connection. They ask themselves if being close to you felt draining or grounding. And when the answer feels peaceful, they start to come back. Not because you pulled them, but because the absence reminded them of your steadiness. What you need to remember is that emotional closeness for an avoidant is not a constant state. It's a rhythm, expansion and retreat, connection and solitude. They love deeply, but cyclically. And if you learn to dance with that rhythm, to stop chasing the moments of silence, you create a pattern they've never known before, love that doesn't demand. This doesn't mean you tolerate neglect. It means you interpret their silence with compassion, not insecurity. Because in their quiet, they're not erasing you. They're finding the strength to come back whole. And each time they do, they trust a little more. If you can love an avoidant without trying to own them, they will eventually give you the one thing they've always kept hidden, their heart. They'll never say it first. They won't announce it with big gestures or sudden declarations. When an avoidant begins to fall in love, it shows up in the smallest, quietest details, so subtle you might miss them if you're looking for the usual signs of affection. They'll start remembering things, small things, the way you like your coffee, the tone of your laugh, the exact words you said during a difficult moment. To them, attention is intimacy. When they begin to store details about you, it means you've entered the emotional space they usually guard. Another sign, they stop rehearsing. Avoidants often calculate their words, staying in control of what they reveal. But when feelings grow, control slips. You'll catch them saying something vulnerable, then quickly trying to downplay it, like, anyway, it's not a big deal. But it is a big deal. That moment of unfiltered truth is their heart peeking out. They also begin to worry, not in the anxious way of checking if you're still there, but in the protective way of wanting to do right by you. The same person who once seemed detached now pays attention to how their behavior affects you. That awareness is love in translation. And then there's the stillness. Avoidants who are falling in love become quieter, not colder. It's not detachment, it's processing. They're feeling something powerful but unfamiliar, safety. And safety, for them, is terrifying at first. Because being safe with you means being seen. And being seen means being vulnerable. So when they pause, when they take time to think, when they look at you but say nothing, don't fill that silence with fear. It's not distance, it's integration. They're realizing that you've reached a place no one else has. If you stay steady through this stage, you'll witness something rare, the transformation of self-protection into self-expression. They'll start showing up differently, not because they've changed who they are, but because they finally trust that love with you doesn't require losing themselves. When that happens, you're no longer just someone they care about. You become the one they feel safe enough to love. When an avoidant grows quiet, it's easy to assume they've lost interest. But most of the time, that silence isn't a sign of detachment. It's a battle, a private, internal war between two voices, one that craves closeness and one that fears it. To love an avoidant is to understand that silence often means they're feeling too much, not too little. They withdraw when emotions become too intense to regulate, when affection begins to feel like exposure. It's not that they don't want to connect. It's that connection awakens the exact wound they've spent their life protecting. Avoidants carry a deep fear that love will eventually require them to give up something essential: their autonomy, their stability, their control. They've learned that vulnerability can cost them safety. So when you love them openly, without reservation, it touches something sacred but dangerous inside them. It reminds them of every time being open led to pain. That's why their silence often comes right after intimacy, after a good date, after a heartfelt conversation, after a moment of closeness that feels too real. You'll think everything is perfect, and suddenly they'll pull away. But that's not rejection, it's recovery. They're retreating into emotional solitude, trying to make sense of what just happened, trying to remind themselves that they're still safe. The worst thing you can do in those moments is chase. The best thing you can do is stay still. Respond, not react. Allow the space without assigning meaning to it. Because to the avoidant, your composure in their silence is a revelation. It tells them, I can be myself, even in fear, and you won't abandon me for it. That kind of acceptance is the antidote to their avoidance. It turns love from something risky into something restorative. So the next time their silence feels like distance, remember, it's often the sound of them trying to trust you. Every quiet retreat, every pause, every delayed message, it's not indifference. It's a person learning, slowly, that love can be safe. This is the moment that tests you most, the pullback. One day they're affectionate, curious, present. The next, they seem unreachable. You feel the warmth drain from the connection, and your mind starts spinning. What did I do wrong? Are they losing interest? Should I reach out more? But here's the truth most people miss. The pullback isn't a sign of fading feelings. It's a reflex of fear. For an avoidant, love feels safest when it's slightly out of reach. The closer they get to real emotional intimacy, the more exposed they feel. Their instinct isn't to hurt you. It's to restore control. The space they create isn't about punishing you. It's about calming their own nervous system. So how do you respond? You breathe. You don't chase the silence. You don't demand explanations. And you don't try to fix what isn't broken. You shift your focus inward, to your own balance, your own peace. The energy of self-respect speaks louder than reassurance ever could. When you stay grounded during their retreat, you teach them something their attachment system has never known: that love doesn't disappear when they need distance. This is how you build trust in an avoidance world, not through words, but through emotional consistency. When they come back, and they almost always do, they're not testing whether you miss them. They're testing whether the connection remains safe in their absence. Your steadiness becomes proof. It tells them that they can retreat and still belong. And when they see that you didn't chase or punish, a small crack appears in their armor. The wall that once protected them begins to feel unnecessary. They realize you aren't trying to control their rhythm. You're simply keeping time beside it. That's how intimacy begins for them. Not in intensity, but in permission. You become the first person who lets them breathe inside love. Patience here isn't passivity, it's power. Because when you stop trying to make them stay, you give them the freedom to choose you. And that choice, for an avoidant, means everything. When an avoidant begins to return after pulling away, they won't announce it. They'll test the waters quietly, sending a casual message, asking a neutral question, or finding a reason to be around you again. On the surface, it looks small, but in their world, it's monumental. It means they're risking proximity again. What happens next determines whether trust grows or shatters. If you meet their return with resentment, accusations, emotional coldness, or punishment, you confirm what they've always feared. That love is conditional. That closeness always carries a cost. But if you meet it with calm, steady warmth, not eagerness, not desperation, just openness, you begin to rewrite their emotional blueprint. Rebuilding trust with an avoidant isn't about grand reconciliation. It's about creating repeated moments of safety. The little things matter most. The soft tone of your voice when they expect anger, the quiet acceptance when they admit a mistake, the patience when they take longer to open up. These small consistencies are the emotional evidence they need to believe that love can exist without danger. The irony is that avoidants don't trust quickly not because they don't want to, but because they once trusted too deeply and got hurt for it. Their walls aren't arrogance. They're architecture built from survival. So when they sense your steadiness, your refusal to make them pay for their fear, something inside them softens. The wall doesn't crumble. It shifts, one brick at a time. This stage requires emotional maturity on your part. You'll be tempted to ask for clarity, for commitment, for labels. But what they need most is consistency. The label will come later. The safety must come first. And when they feel that safety again and again, their nervous system begins to recalibrate. They start associating closeness with calm instead of chaos. That's when the real transformation begins, not just in the relationship, but inside them. They start believing that love doesn't have to be lost to be safe. In that belief, you stop being a threat. You become home. You'll know it not by a declaration, but by a change in their presence. The avoidant who once pulled away at the first sign of vulnerability now lingers a little longer. They stay after conversations that once made them uneasy. They reach for you, not out of need, but out of choice. This moment is sacred because it's not about romance. It's about surrender. For the avoidant, opening up means confronting years of emotional conditioning. Every instinct tells them that love equals loss, that intimacy means danger. But something in you feels different. You didn't chase, you didn't demand. You waited, calmly, without resentment. That quiet safety becomes undeniable. And when they finally step closer, it's because their fear has found somewhere to rest. They might start to share the stories they've never told anyone. The moments of shame, the memories of abandonment, the times they learned that affection could turn into control. As they speak, they're not just revealing their past, they're testing whether you'll stay. Your response here matters more than any, "I love you." If you listen without trying to fix them, if you let their truth exist without judgment, you show them something revolutionary, love that doesn't invade. In those moments, they start to experience what emotional safety truly feels like. They realize that vulnerability doesn't have to lead to rejection, that love can coexist with autonomy, that they can be seen fully and still be safe. And as they lean into that, something begins to shift inside them. Their pattern of self-protection becomes self-awareness. Their distance becomes presence. Their silence becomes trust. When an avoidant finally lets you in, it's not a single moment. It's a quiet unfolding. It's in how they reach out when they used to retreat, how they say, "I missed you," without choking on the words, how they finally stop preparing to lose you. They don't fall in love easily. But when they do, it's honest, raw, and deeply loyal. Because the one they trust enough to love is the one who made them feel safe enough to stop hiding. Here's the truth most people don't want to admit. Loving an avoidant will test your patience, your ego, and your emotional stability. It will make you question whether love should feel this measured, this restrained. But if you do it right, if you stay grounded in yourself, you'll learn something profound about connection. That love isn't about chasing or convincing. It's about being steady enough to let someone come to you when they're ready. Because at its core, the avoidance fear isn't about you. It's about safety. They're not avoiding love. They're avoiding the pain they associate with it. The moment they realize that your love doesn't demand their surrender, something inside them begins to heal. But for that to happen, you must remain anchored in your own emotional center. Loving an avoidant doesn't mean silencing your needs or becoming endlessly patient. It means communicating with calm clarity, saying, "I care about you, and I also need connection," without accusation. It means setting boundaries that protect your peace, not as punishment, but as proof that your love has structure. Avoidants don't trust chaos, but they can trust consistency. And that's the balance. Giving them space without abandoning yourself. Holding them gently without holding them hostage. Being soft without losing your strength. When you master that equilibrium, you become a mirror of the very thing they've been seeking all along. A love that is safe, free, and grounded. If they stay, it's because they feel safe with you. If they pull away, it's because they're scared. But if your steadiness remains, even in their distance, they'll find their way back, not out of guilt, but out of recognition. They'll see that in a world that always demanded, you offered acceptance. And when they finally love you, it won't be halfway. It will be the kind of love that grows in silence, endures in distance, and deepens in safety. Because you didn't force it, you created the space for it to exist. That is the secret to making an avoidant feel safe enough to love you. If this resonated with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment, subscribe for more, and keep learning how to love without losing yourself.